Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Scrutiny Committee for Planning, Economic Growth and Net Zero. I will now ask Councillor Peacock to read the safety regulations as we've got members of the public present. Would you oblige, Councillor?
The building fire alarm signal is a continuous two-tone alarm. On hearing the evacuation alarm, 1. Leave the building by the nearest Margs exit route. 2. Follow the green signs to the assembly point, large staff car park opposite the entrance to the building. 3. Anyone who cannot use the stairs will be helped by the officers present after other people have left. 4. Do not return to the building until told it is safe to do so by an authorised officer. Also, please note the whole of the council site is a no smoking area, and please, mobile phones must be switched to silent during the meeting. So if you could do that now, ensure that's done. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Adam. In case those who don't know me, I'm Councillor Neville Walker. On my left is my Vice Chairman, Councillor Adam Peacock. Our legal advisor, Ken Tudor, is at his left. Alison is taking notes in the corner. On my right, we have Julie Holmes, our Deputy Chief Executive, Christine Hall, our Chief Executive, Sally and Andrew. We also are blessed with the presence of Councillor Solbury and Councillor Hillier. So I'm a bit concerned, we've got so many people. We've also have Councillor Webster and Ruth Demere. I do assure you I haven't come here, as being in my last meeting, to try and pinch the council's silverware. So, turning to item 1, to note substitutes in accordance with Council Procedure Rule 4, substitute at meetings of committees, etc. Councillor Adams is substituting for Councillor Laband. Councillor DeBell is substituting for Councillor Marsh. Councillor Hicks is substituting for Councillor Hatton. Councillor 2 to receive apologies for absence. I've received apologies for Councillor Hatton, Laband and Marsh. 3 to declare declarations of interest from members in respect of any member on the agenda. Do I have any who want to declare? Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. My microphone doesn't seem to be working, but I'll shout up. I'm declared an interest because I'm local correspondent for the Open Spaces Society in Mid-Sussex. That's in relation to agenda item 7.
Thank you. Turning to item 4, to confirm the minutes of the meeting of the Scrutiny Committee for Housing, Planning and Economic Growth held on the 5th and 18th of October 2022. I would ask members to use the microphone touchscreen to record their vote, please.
Councillor Brown. Councillor Brown.
Can
you take the vote again, we have to restart it because
Okay.
of some people that
Should we
were
do a
logged
show of
off.
hands? Should we do a show of hands?
You can do that way if you like.
Yes, do you want to just,
We've got a technical problem, so I think the best
Just for
thing we
this
can
one.
do, if we could have a show of hands. All in favour, please say aye.
I think it's in favour.
Counting has now concluded, and the result was what, Terry, please? 11. Thank you very much for that. Item 5, to consider any items that the chairman agrees to take as urgent business. I have none. So turning out now to item 6, which are water resources, resilient and future planning. I'm pleased to welcome this evening members from the water authorities, Lee Dance, Organisational Director, Water Reserve South East, Douglas Whitfield, Operational Manager, South East Water, Andrew Halliday, Water Resources Strategic Manager, South East Water, Joe Shipley, Community Engagement Manager, South East Water, and finally Nick Price, Water Resources and Strategic Manager, Southern Water. So, gentlemen, if you'd like to, or ladies, if you'd like to take the call, it's all yours.
Chairman, excuse me, I have a point of order. Can I make a point of order?
Yes, by all means.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to see South East Water here to contribute to this meeting. However, as you know, Scrutiny Committee meetings normally have a report in each case. We haven't got a report.
Yes, we
here.
have.
So I'd like to ask for your understanding that we clear off all our comments and questions on the substantive papers that are in front of us before we get the report on operational items. Thank you.
Judy, can you answer that, please?
Yes, so Councillor Brown, I'll draw your attention to the item 6 agenda item, page 17, which is actually the covering report, which introduces this topic and sets the context and the scenes. So it is to this report that our colleagues from the water authorities are presenting today.
May I ask why we haven't got the report to see before the meeting?
You have, it's in your agenda pack.
I only received my agenda pack this morning in the post, but I've been through it. I've been looking at it virtually all day. Could you tell me where that report is? The operational report I'm referring to.
So if you turn to your agenda pack, it's on page 17 of the agenda pack, item 6. And if it's okay with you, Chairman, I can ask Sally to introduce the report before we turn to the presentation.
Okay, that'd be fine. Sally, would you take the floor, please?
Thank you very much.
This operational incident on
He's not even using his microphone and he's interrupting.
but there's no report on it.
Yeah.
No, Judy wants to speak.
Okay. I'm sorry, I don't think I and the rest of the committee could hear the question that you asked. Your microphone wasn't on, so I didn't hear what you were asking.
It's now working. Thank you. No, I'm asking whether this report was included in the pack, and I don't think it was. It wasn't, was it?
Yes, the pack that you received in the post. It's on page 17, item 6.
This represent this now that's coming up.
No, the presentation is speaking to the report, and I think the intention is that it will be circulated after the presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, can we then carry on, please?
I think you wanted Sally to.
Sally, would you carry on, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. As Judy's indicated, following the request made on the 5th of October to invite our colleagues from the water companies to Scrutiny Committee, this report sets the context for those presentations. So it reminds people of the operational outages and incidents, but it also reminds people of planning for future growth and the roles and responsibilities of the water companies. As Judy said, the presentations will be circulated post the meeting, but the report was just setting that context.
Thank you. Right. Ladies and gentlemen from the Water Authorities, would you like to start, please?
Good evening. I'm Douglas Whitfield, Operations Director for South East Water. So we're going to run through two separate presentations this evening. I'm going to take you through a few slides talking about the freeze-thaw incident that we saw before Christmas, and then my colleagues from Water Resources are going to take you through the longer-term plan. So I'm going to start and run through. Happy to take questions at the end. So if you look on the screens, you can see we've put up there a map of a zoomed-in part of the South East Water supply area, showing which of the mid-Sussex district area is covered. And as you can see, it's pretty much all South East Water. And what you can also just see from this slide is that the neighbouring districts are also in South East Water to the east, but to the north and to the west, we've got other water companies supplying those systems. And then just for clarity, we're a water-only company, so South East Water does the drinking water supplies, and in this region, Southern Water do the sewage supplies for the whole region, with different water-only companies over the top of that. So we can move on to the next slide. And this is a slightly zoomed out map, just sort of articulating that point a bit further. So this is our South East Water's regions, and you can see we've got two distinct operational regions. One region is in the west, we call it the Western region, which runs from Maidenhead down to Petersfield and Aldershot to Basingstoke. Geographically separate from that is the region we're in today, and you can see that region encompasses West Sussex, East Sussex, and most of Kent. And the reason we're talking today is for the issues that we had in the Sussex region just before Christmas. Our normal supply, just to set the scene, is to about 2.3 million customers across the company region. We're supplying, on average, 530 million litres a day. This can go up to nearly 700 million litres in peak demand in the summer. And our average use of customers is 150 litres a day. And I won't go through all of those bullet points in the interest of time, but you can see our main key facts and figures. You can move on to the next slide, please. One thing that's worth pointing out before we go on to talk about the incident that we've seen is that there's been rapid change in the way people have been using their water since we had the COVID-19 lockdown in 2020, and we certainly saw that impact to South East Water, and other companies have as well. For us, during that lockdown, we saw a 20% increase in household water consumption, because obviously for the duration of the lockdown, a large number of people that would normally commute into London or out of the region to work were at home, locked down, so we saw our water usage increase. And in the same way, Thames Water saw their water usage decrease, certainly in their London region, significantly, and saw an increase in their commuter regions as well. And to a certain extent, that change in demand pattern has remained since 2020, so we're still seeing different demand patterns now, particularly over the summer period, as we're into a more hybrid working arrangement now, where lots more people still don't go into the office or go in 2 or 3 days a week, but have a working from home flexible arrangement. And what that has done for us and for water companies across the country, but certainly in the South East, is change that demand profile, which can have quite a large impact during peak periods where if the demand balance is relatively tight, our projections of water resources based on life pre-COVID are now changing slightly with people's usage patterns changing. We're just putting through our draft water resource management plan, which is looking to address these challenges in the longer term. And one of the key focuses on that plan and all the other investment plans we're doing now is certainly on network resilience and trying to make sure that we can deal with these peaks and troughs. And my colleagues will talk a bit more about the long-term resources a bit later on. Narrowing down into last year, 2022 was quite an extraordinary year for us as an industry and as a country. Think of all the weather extremes we saw. We started the year, if you like, with Storm Eunice in March, which caused us, it was one of the largest incidents we had seen of that type. We went pretty much straight from Storm Eunice into summer heat wave and sort of long-term dry period, which led to temporary use bans in some areas. And from that, pretty much straight into flooding when the temporary use bans came off, and then into the freeze thaw. So it was a very challenging year for us operationally, and crucially, it had a large impact on our network. Those extremes of weather, the drying out and the contracting of the ground, led to some large increases in burst mains and leaks, and consequently some very large demand peaks as well. And one of those demand peaks was the incident in December, which was the most challenging incident I've been involved in over 20 years in the industry, and I was involved in the 2018 freeze thaw incident as well. And we didn't get everything right in this incident. I think it's fair to say, we acknowledge that, and we certainly are looking at what we can do, A, to try and prevent us being impacted by weather extremes like this going forward, but also, if they're going to happen, how do we react to them better, particularly around regards alternate water supplies during the incident and around communications with customers. It was an extremely challenging event, and it was extremely difficult to do those things, but we've got to get better at that. So please bear that in mind as we go through. And as you'll see, what the incident that we're talking about, the impact of the Sussex area, actually started on the 11th of December, which was quite early on. And it was running for a week or so before we saw any impact in Sussex. And initially, our main impact was in Kent. The part of the incident that caused the real impact in Sussex was the coldest night, which caused us a problem at one of the main treatment works supplying this area. But prior to that, we did have an incident team in place. We were looking at where we would likely to have problems, and we were starting to see an outbreak of leaks and bursts as that cold weather really set into the ground and started to impact the ground around the pipes. And you can see, due to the leaks, we did get an increase in demand in that 2-week period, and actually it was within 3 or 4 days when the thaw started, of about 100 million litres. So our demand went up from that average of about 530 up to near 600 and over 600 in some of the peaks. So if you can move on to the next one. We assembled our incident team from across the business, and we weren't the only affected company. We were one of the worst affected, but there were issues across, certainly across the south of the country, certainly in Welsh as well. Welsh Water had large problems as well. And that really made the incident even more difficult, because at the time we were calling for alternate water supplies. A number of other companies were calling for alternate water supplies as well, and that put large strain on the sort of national supply chain. At one point during the incident, there was no bottled water in the south of England, so we had a few hours where we had to try and get more stocks from other parts of the country. So it really was a challenging incident. We set up local resilience forums, engaging with councillors and other stakeholders across the patch. I was sitting on the Kent local resilience forums. A colleague of mine was sitting on the Sussex local resilience forums. We also were setting up bottled water stations. During the incident, we had 9 bottled water stations in place throughout the incident. And we also had some dedicated hubs for livestock. Livestock, again, I would say, in the last few years has become a much bigger issue and a concern for us during incidents. And we have to now think of that as well, because it becomes a real concern, obviously, for the rural and farming community that we have. As we've got back to business as usual afterwards and looking at what was happening with the leakage, you can see that about 75% of the leaks that were experienced that caused this increase in demand were actually on customer sides of pipework and on areas where customers were not there for some retail premises where they were shut over the Christmas period, and that really made it a very difficult period for us as well. Having said that, there were leaks on our network, and we repaired, as you can see there, over 473 leaks in total on our network. That's 3 times the average, but we also repaired over 500 leaks on customer supplies. So next slide, please. This just gives you some idea of the temperature profile. And really what caused us the problem here and in 2018 was that swing in temperature. It's not the low temperature, it's not the high temperature, it's the fact it swings from one to the other, which causes you a big problem. And our demand profile, if you overlay that onto this temperature profile, pretty much followed that temperature profile, probably a day behind. So our demand went from 530 up to 600 in the same period over this period. But Sussex in particular, what really caused us the problems that we all experienced here was We've got a key treatment works at Barkham, and it is, if you like, it's a strategic site for us. And if you imagine it as the centre of a cobweb, and there's lots of trunk mains coming out from the centre of that cobweb that Barkham feeds water to. Very reliable treatment works, but one of the things that happened here was a piece of equipment which we've never had a problem with before froze due to the low temperature, and we have trace heating on a lot of our equipment. Despite the trace heating, that piece of equipment froze, which caused the site to shut down. Once the site had shut down, that caused a lot of other problems associated with the cold temperatures. So it was a real challenge for us, and unfortunately, because demand was increasing, our storage reservoirs were at a low level before the treatment works tripped off. Once the treatment works tripped off, we did lose supplies to storage tanks, and as a result, over 22,000 properties were affected. So again, a really large incident for us, massively inconvenient to all of our customers, and we're really sorry for that. And we were doing all we could to try and put that back into supply. We also had a couple of major mains bursts associated with the movement of the ground, just as we were getting supplies back on, which resulted in supplies going off again. So again, it was a challenging period. We got the treatment works restarted, and we did refill the network, but it had to be a gradual process so that we didn't refill the network, causing more problems, which unfortunately meant there were some customers that were out for multiple days, but we were trying to recharge the network such that when the supplies came back on, we could guarantee they wouldn't go off again. If we go on to the next slide, I think we can see a map of where the customers are affected. So you can see the lighter shaded picture to the right-hand corner of that shows the areas impacted in the Kent area, which was going along at the same time. The area in the light grey shade on the left shows you the areas that are impacted across Sussex, and you can see the main areas were quite widespread. Crowborough, Bolcombe, Wadhurst, Best Beach, I won't read all of those. It was a large, widespread incident. And you can also see, we've colour-coded to see how long they were affected for. Actually, we've gone to the next one. I'm running out of time. And this is the Mid-Sussex area impacted. And again, as you can see, it's a zoomed-in part of the graph, of the slide we showed you earlier. And you can see you're on the edge of our system, so you're on the edge of the cobweb, if you like, so taking longer to charge up the network, get the supplies back in, which is why some of those areas were impacted for longer than the others. Next one, please. So the incident was very difficult. Customers are very patient, very good to all the people on the bottled water stations, but understandably lots of frustration out there for having the impact in the first place. And we've quickly moved on in the new year about dealing with compensation. So we've got a customer code of practice which we've sort of abided by. We've also got a guaranteed standard of service sort of requirement, our regulations. And under those, you're not required to make payments where it's an extreme event for weather from the regulatory point of view, but clearly we felt that we needed to make payments despite that. So, and you can see on there some of the details. So we've applied credits to over 15,000 customers, which equates to a refund of £1.7 million. We've another 1,200 non-household customers will be refunded about £330,000 through their retailer. And also we set up a community fund, because obviously we compensate the customers individually, but the communities are impacted, and we found that that's a good thing for us to be doing, is to sort of set up some funds that can actually help the communities that were impacted. Move on to the next one. So, I think I almost the last one. This is my last slide, isn't it? So throughout the period, we were focused on finding leaks. I think I've been through this already, this one actually. I think that was my last slide, so I skipped on to the backup. So that was the incident, that was the scene, and that was what we did on the compensation. As I say, we know that throughout this, alternate water, despite setting up 9 bottled water stations, it was very challenging, and we need to look at how we improve that going forward. And certainly the communications through the incident was a real challenge for us. We're reviewing the systems that we use now to try and make sure they're more robust and that they can deal with incidents of this scale should we have them again in the future. So I wasn't planning on going through these slides. So that's my slides, and because I only had 10 minutes. So any questions, I'm happy to take any questions or any comments people may have.
Thank you very much, Douglas. I'm taking questions from members, but we're trying to limit each of the presentations to 10 minutes. So I would ask you to keep your questions, just one question, precise and to the point, and leave it at that. I'm not prepared to take multiple questions. So could I, first of all, ask John DeBell, please?
Thank you for your excellent presentation, covered a lot of ground. My question is to do with the fact that COVID working from home has changed the situation completely, as you said. Has there been, this gives you an excellent opportunity for demand mapping with other suppliers. I was wondering if you'd done some work on that, and if it was looking as though it was permanent, so it needed to change in terms of reorganisation of necessary supplies, reordering of investment. I mean, clearly, if say the London region is not getting as many people using water as there are down here, then some of that money needs to be changed down here as well. Is it staying the same, or do you think that it is sliding back again? I think these are very potent points for us going forward, aren't they?
So I wouldn't say the changes we saw in 2020 are permanent,
No.
but a change in demand pattern is definitely seeming to stick much longer. So it's not as it was in lockdown, but it has not gone back to how it was before. So we're somewhere in between. And what we found is in the past, our planning was done at a zonal level. And at a zonal level, and at an average supply for the year, things balance. That's fine. What we've seen in the change in use that we have now is the average is not really changing very much. It's the peaks that are changing. And that's a challenge for us. If you look at the challenge for the investment package that you need on the average demands, it's not changed that much. What we're finding now is we're having to go much more granular at sub-zone level, looking at localised issues, because it's small pinch point areas. And it is a difference. There's two types of issues with water supply. One is having enough raw water in the environment to maintain supplies through the year. The other is having enough capacity in the network to pump water fast enough to maintain supplies during the peak periods. And that's almost the challenge that we're trying to get to now. So I think, to answer your question, I think demand patterns have changed. They probably haven't quite settled into what they're going to be yet.
Thank you very much.
Lee, I don't know if you wanted to add any more.
Thank you, Douglas. Christy Adams, please. Councillor Christy Adams.
So I'm the councillor for Bolney Ward, which includes Warning, Lyd and Bolney, and my mother lives in Cookfield, and over the years I have driven with containers of water to her to deliver water. So I know that this isn't a one-off incident and it's recurring, and that's what concerns me. And when we get an incident, the communication to people is thin on the ground. And as you have everybody's email or address, isn't it possible for you to contact residents and let them know your water's going off for 24 hours? So we had an incident in Bolney and Warning, Lyd and Cookfield where basically Ardingly hadn't had water for 4 days. Our water was turned off in those 3 villages for 24 hours, but no one had any idea when it was coming back on, whether it was going to. There were people backing up into Cookfield to go to the water station. When they got there wasn't any bottles of water, because obviously what you're saying, you didn't have bottles. But another solution that someone came up with is you could have a tanker full of water and people could bring their own containers and fill up from that. That would save the bottles. It would be much cheaper for you, and it would be much better for the environment. So I don't know if there's a possibility of you looking at those two things, communication in terms of emailing people directly, and could you provide tankers of water where we could use our own containers?
Well, we know that definitely the communication was not 100% during this incident. When it comes to emails, we have about 500,000 email addresses on our system, so we don't have every single customer. We actually have more text messages, more mobile phone numbers on our system. The communication tool that we use to contact customers with those details that we do have, we know was not up to scratch during this incident. That's our In Your Area map, where customers can register for information and they'll be provided with text alerts or email updates. During this incident, that system fell over. And so we weren't able to get the updates and update that webpage as much and as often as we would like. So we're now fast-tracking a system that we are going to build in-house that will be able to have that capacity. We'll be able to manage in a much more dynamic way. We'll be able to get text messages out far quicker to those customers, those details that we have, and as well the emails as well. So we know it was not up to scratch, and it hasn't been for some time, but we're putting a lot of work in behind the scenes now to try and improve that for the future. Okay,
Thank you.
I'll alternate water, that's okay. So I really only agree with you. So we need to, we are looking at how we deal with alternate water. There's a number of ways we can deal with, particularly you mentioned, taking water to elderly relatives or people that can't get out. We have a priority service register, which we really encourage all customers or anyone who knows anyone who's vulnerable to register on that PSR. That means we will then deliver water to that customer, so they won't have to come out. That's really crucial. We've seen a massive uptake in that in the last 12 months, which is a challenge for us then in delivering, but that's the right thing to do for those. I would agree with you on the use of tankers. So we did have tankers in the area. We have tankers refilling our service reservoirs. Using a tanker is always a challenge. Is where do you use it? Do you inject that water directly into the mains to put the supply back on? Do you hold it at an alternate water station for people to fill up containers? Or do you put it into the reservoirs? We used tankers through this incident. We didn't use them for alternate water stations. We were using them to try and refill parts of the network and reservoirs. But it's something we're looking at, as are other companies, about trying to use more tankers and use them in a different way. And I do agree, our emergency plan does look at, as things go on, the next stage is to move away from bottled water to having containers that you fill up, things like that. So we are looking at all those things. Fully acknowledge it was very challenging in this period in December.
Thank you. Councillor Simon Hicks, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to ask about, in terms of water leaks, what the standards are for improving the performance there. I know you've got a target 15% over the next 5 years, halve it, I think, by 2050, but that still doesn't sound ambitious enough, given the sort of percentage at the moment is probably a little bit under 20%. And thinking about other countries like Germany, where the percentage is 4 or 5%, and I just wondered if we can be a bit more ambitious about those sort of percentages, but particularly whether there's any targets for individual leaks. There's the frustration from residents is seeing week after week, month after month, a leak in the road that hasn't been addressed, and you log on to your interactive map, and that you report it several times, but it still doesn't give any indication of when those sort of leaks might be fixed. Thank you.
Yeah, leakage is always a challenge topic for any water company to talk about. It's complicated. We have a leakage target that's set by the regulator, and effectively we're funded to achieve that leakage target. South East Water have reached our leakage target for the last 13 years in a row. You're right, the whole industry has a challenge for this. We're funded in 5-year periods. This 5-year period, 2020-25, the whole industry has a challenge to reduce leakage by 15%. That is actually quite challenging to achieve that. And what we're finding is that the traditional methods of reducing leakage are not going to get that reduction. We're going to have to look at new technologies, new techniques and innovation, which is what we should be doing. And the balance is on the cost of leakage is, if we've got £1,000 to spend, is it best to spend that on reducing leaks, or is it best to spend that on developing a new resource? And that's the balance. I do agree with you that leakage is a real challenge, and as an industry we have to do better on that. All I can say from a South East Water point of view is we've always achieved our regulatory target, and we're looking to see how we outperform that. This year's been very challenging, and as I said, with the weather extremes we saw, the outbreaks we've had, as we saw on the slides there, 3 times as many leaks over certain periods of time. And what that does is put large amounts of work into the system that we have to then try and react to. So you're right, over the last few months, we've had leaks running too long outside our own internal KPIs. We're starting to see that come under control now. I would say we're heading towards business as usual, which should mean we should be repairing all of our visible leaks within 7 days. We're not there yet. We've got some very difficult ones that are still out there. But it's certainly an area of massive focus for us and the industry, and will remain so.
So, thank you. So 7 days is your standard target?
It's our internal target for a visible leak. I'm very conscious we've got a number of leaks that are outside that at the moment, and we're trying to chip through that backlog. Sometimes there's reasons why you can't get on them sooner than that, if there's a restriction on the road for roadworks, or if it's near a level crossing or something like that, but that's certainly what we aim for.
Thank you. Councillor Philip Coot, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for your presentation, very informative. Point, would you say that UK power networks are larger than you? They the people who supply the electricity for the whole area?
Yeah. So,
Well, they inform people when there is going to be a power cut, and if there is an outage because of some tree falling down, it's immediately on the screen. So I would suggest that perhaps you could look at that. My other point is, I've attended many of your seminars at the Copthorne Hotel, and I've been told over and over again that you're going to build a reservoir because the water from the aquifers may run out. What is your intention to build the reservoir?
that's going to be picked up in the next presentation, that's it.
All right. Thank you. Councillor Richard Bates, please.
Mr Chairman, I'm a bit concerned about, we were talking about firefighting in the last year, and it seems that we're anticipating this to increase in the future with supplies of more bottled water, etc. I mean, I think the residents need more reassurance than what we're hearing so far this evening. And I think, we need to know that there's going to be more resilience in the network, and there doesn't seem to be any great plans to do this. So I listen out to hear what you're saying.
I think, Councillor Bates, I think that will come into the second session. Thank you. Councillor Julia Mockford, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I wonder if the water companies would be considering the installation of smart meters, per se. This would enable the company and homeowners to better monitor the usage and also identify leakage problems. Just a thought.
Douglas, please.
Smart meters absolutely form a large part of our future investment package on resources. I know Lee might cover that in his presentation. Just to be everyone's aware, so South East Water was one of the first companies to have company-wide customer metering. We completed a company-wide metering program in 2005, so 95% of all our customers are already metered. They are, at the time, they were the best meters put in, if you like, but they were walk-by meters. They're not smart meters, as in you can see it live. That's certainly where the industry's heading, and it's the discussion in the industry, how quickly can you do that and what's the right technology to use. But absolutely, that's a crucial part of our future.
Thank you. Most informative. We now go on to presentation 2, Planning for Future Growth by Lee Dance, please.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Lee Dance. I'm the Organisational Director for Water Resources in the South East, and I've got a couple of slides to explain what that actually is in a moment. I'm joined here by my colleagues who will give some more details about the individual company plans when we get to that. I just wanted to start, though, just a bit of a recap and reminder of what water companies' roles are, which are set out on this slide here. So we are obliged, the industry water companies, to connect all new developments to the network or to our network system. And the way we go about ensuring we deliver very good long-term plans to do that is through a series of plans. You can see a couple of them are listed up there. The ones we're really going to focus on with the time we've got are the Water Resource Management Plan. This is a statutory plan that's produced every 5 years by the water companies, has to look out a minimum of 25 years into the future. The plans that we're going to discuss tonight look out over a 50-year period, and they do look at a number of different futures. So they are adaptive plans. And alongside that is something called the Water Resources in the South East Regional Plan, which is a bit I'll come on to in a moment. So these are long-term plans. Out of those plans come activities, actions, initiatives that we need to deliver in the shorter term to support the long-term direction of travel. And as Doug said earlier, they feed into the business plan process. So having developed those plans, we then put them through into a business plan with our economic regulator to ensure we can get them funded and delivered. And just at the bottom there, just for information, we've set out how we're regulated. So we are a very regulated industry. Ofwat is the economic regulator. Environment Agency has a very big role, but equally the Drinking Water Inspectorate, working with CC Water for consumers, and Natural England as well. So protection of the environment and ensuring the things we're doing is also key as well. So that's just a bit of a recap of where we are. Thank you. So in terms of Water Resources South East and what it is, as I said, these plans are produced every 5 years, but after the last set of plans that were produced in 2019, there was a National Water Resources Framework that was developed. There was a feeling that, as well as the company's individual plans, that the planning needs to be looking at a larger scale and more regionally and strategically, given the range of challenges that exist, not only for us in this part of the world, but across England. And so there were 5 regional groups set up across England. One of them is Water Resources in the South East, which is the one that I work with. And it's an alliance of the 6 water companies in the region. And those 6 companies we've been working with, along with industry regulators, other regional groups, and a range of stakeholders to really get under what the challenges are across the region in terms of resilience and the environment. And having identified that, then what the options should be, or what options should be considered, and cascade down into the company's plans. So it's a very strategic bit of work that then can feed down into those plans. Together, just a bit of background, across that region, the current supply is 6 billion litres of water per day. If you look out over the period to 2075, where we've looked at the range of challenges and the drivers for future water need, you can see this lovely kind of beaker shape at the bottom. This is saying that from where we are now, if we were to do nothing, if we weren't to plan at all, and we were to look at the challenges across the region, we need an additional 2.67 billion litres of water on top of the 6 billion that we supply already. And you can see in there the things that are driving that. So resilience to drought and climate change is about a quarter of the need. So that's factored into the plans. An important driver is also the growing population, accounts for close to a quarter as well. But a really, really big piece that's come through here is driven by government ambition and policy, and reflected in our plans, is around the environment and resetting where we take water from in the environment and making environmental improvements. Just to the right then is what do we do to meet that requirement? And you can see there are a range of schemes in there, which I won't go through in great detail. But we were talking earlier about reservoirs, certainly they're included in there. Strategic transfers to share water that we have between the companies. In the more distant future and under more challenging scenarios, the need to look at desalination and water reuse schemes as well. But a key part of the solution is around demand management as well. So we've already talked a little bit earlier about reducing leakage by 50% by 2050, but also there's coming through from government policy is a real ambition and drive for the industry and also for government through government-led activities to look at ways that we can reduce the demand for water as well. In combination, that whole package accounts to £15.6 billion worth of investment required over that 50-year period. So that kind of gives you a bit of a picture. Just drop to the next slide quickly. As I said, a really, really big driver is about reducing abstraction to improve the environment. This slide here, it's a little bit hard to read, but down the side, what it's showing is the changes in abstraction, or the percentage of the abstraction from existing sources that are required to meet some of the very ambitious environmental improvements that are needed. So certainly in this area, there are challenges, as there are across the region, and part of the work that Water Resources South East is doing, with support from the companies, is working with regulators and stakeholders to really understand what's required to deliver those reductions and replace that water. And certainly over the next 10 years, there's a really significant programme looking at further evidence so that those decisions are are very clear and justified. So that's just very quickly an introduction, really. I've got Nick Price from Southern Water with me and Andrew Halliday from South East Water, so they will be able to provide a little bit more detail of what's happened beyond the regional piece of work and how that's cascaded down into the individual company statutory plans. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Christie Adams, please.
So it said on the previous slide, an excellent point, which was that you were going to reduce leakage by 50%. How are you going to do it?
It's going to be really challenging. We think with the technologies that we've got available, we probably get more than half the way there. At the moment, it would require a reliance on some pretty significant replacement programs and infrastructure improvements. And the industry's really looking at this beyond just our group, but as an industry, right at national level, has been developing a roadmap to really try and understand where the innovation could come from that would support a more cost-effective delivery. But at the moment, to achieve that 50% reduction would require some very, very significant investment beyond the technologies we have now in some of the infrastructure as well.
So you're saying you can't do it?
We can do it, but I think what the roadmap needs to do is look at how we can deliver it in the most cost-effective and environmentally sustainable way. We want to look and see where we can make those improvements as we go forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Janice Edward, please.
Thank you. To say I'm a little bit disappointed because a few months ago when we requested to have a full discussion on the water cycle, it included not just our water we drink, but the waste and drainage, which is pretty important when we're considering all the site allocations. But I will, perhaps further, we can invite Southern Water to come up and discuss it. But I have two questions. We're often, when we talk about this water situation, we talk about water neutrality. I can't figure that out because what goes down, what goes in must go out. So I really don't understand that. Now, Chairman, I don't know if it's appropriate to ask a question. In our agenda on page 23, there were a lot of questions about the water on page 23, and in particular is question 11 about pipelines. I don't quite understand. It says here, if you want to share a pipeline with another water company, this would require the water to be chemically compatible across the region. I don't understand. I really thought water was H2O and you added stuff to it. So could you please, two explanations please for me. Thank you very much.
Yep, sure. So on the first point, Nick's going to pick up on water neutrality and what's meant by that in a moment. On the pipelines, some of the transfers we can consider will be raw water transfers and some are treated water transfers. On raw water transfers, one of the important considerations is about water moving from one catchment to another that could have different properties, might even have promote the movement of species, and so there's constraints around that element. On the treatment side, not all water is treated in the same way. The best example of that is around chlorination. So in an area like South East Waters, they chlorinate the water. In Sutton and East Surrey's waters area, they chloraminate the water, which I always find difficult to say. But those two waters can't naturally be mixed. And so that's where that's an example of where that point's quite important. And I think the other thing that's come about, particularly where DWI is so important in the discussions, is that the Drinking Water Inspectorate are sort of putting a careful eye over the transfers that are being considered to make sure some of those any issues to do with water quality have been properly considered and addressed.
Thank you.
Water neutrality.
Sorry?
Water neutrality.
Water neutrality. Okay.
Yeah, hi, good evening, everyone. My name's Nick Price. I'm the Water Resource Strategy Manager at Southern Water, so a neighbouring water company to South East. We operate to the west of, mostly to the west of the Mid Sussex Council area, although there is a small area actually of overlap into our what we call our Sussex North Water Resource Zone. What I wanted to talk to you about briefly is water neutrality. We are subject to the same plans. We're part of Water Resource South East that Lee's already spoken about, so we're part of the same group that are addressing the long-term challenges we face, and we have our own water resource management plan. But I wasn't proposing to go into detail because Andrew's going to be covering that from a South East Water point of view in a minute. But I'm sure, as the question's already been raised around water neutrality, which is a particular issue and challenge for us at the moment in this area. We are the only water company at the moment with an area that is subject to a water neutrality position statement that's affecting housing planning permissions being given by local authorities. You may have heard of nutrient neutrality, which is having some separate but challenges that more relate to water quality rather than the water quantity. So what I'm showing on this first slide here is a map of our what we call our Sussex North Water Resource Zone. So when we plan for future water and growth, we look at an area that is effectively, we can move water around that area and there's equal risk to customers in that area, and it will be supplied by a certain number of distinct water sources. This area contains a specific abstraction of ours near Pulborough that abstracts from the groundwater and has potentially a connection to some designated conservation sites in the Arun Valley that you may be aware of, Pulborough Brooks, for example. When Natural England discovered 2 years or so ago, and they had been gathering evidence that there could be a connection between our abstraction and the sites, they issued a position statement that effectively implicated it required ourselves as the water company and also local authorities to take action. In our case, the action we are taking is we're investigating whether there is an impact of our abstraction on the sites. We're also have made operational changes to reduce the abstraction from the Harding groundwater source as much as we possibly can to minimise any impact, if there indeed is an impact. And the local authorities, for their role, because of the position statement, they have to ensure that any new growth, i.e. giving planning permission, does not add to the pressure on abstraction pressure of this abstraction. So that's the why there is now a strategy in place that we've been supporting to allow offsetting of growth, of housing growth, to allow housing growth to continue. More specifically, in terms of what the actual drivers are, the environmental drivers and the legislation that's highlighted on the current slide that you can see, it is driven by the Habitats Directive, which covers a number of different types of conservation sites, including special protection areas and special areas of conservation that exist in the Arun Valley. So Natural England are applying the law, applying the Habitats Directive as the legislation stands, and they followed that correctly. We as a water company are doing everything we can to support in making sure those sites are protected and operationally doing what we can in the longer term as well, to ensure that we have got plentiful water, so that we don't have to impact the environment, and we have obviously can meet our customers' expectations from level of service as well. So we have got, over the next 3-4 years, plans to bring new sources of supply online that will allow us to get to that more flexible place. So thank you. So yeah, just a summary on the final slide in terms of what we're doing and what we have been doing. As I said, we are operationally have changed the way we supply our customers by maximising imports of water from neighbouring water companies, working with companies including South East to ensure that we reduce our abstraction that it's potentially impacting these sites. We're trying to go as far as we can with our demand management activities, leakage reduction, and our Target 100 initiative, which is trying to reduce average consumption to 100 litres per person per day. And we're working as far as we can with developers as well to look at potential strategic solutions that allow them to carry on the housing development that's so important for the economy. And finally, I think what we've done is we put more resources in place to support this, because it's, as you can imagine, generated a considerable amount of additional work. In terms of communications, we're now having quarterly webinars, doing newsletters, and speaking to our stakeholders on a regular basis. So I think that was my final slide on water neutrality, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Philip Coote, please.
Question, I'm sorry, sir, I can't see your name. What is the problem? Why can't you repair the leaks in the time that you want to? Is it a question of resources? Most people know here, I spent 20 years of my life in civil engineering, and repairing a leak is not that difficult. It's not nuclear science. It's just digging a hole, finding the leak, and repairing it. Why can't you double the teams you've got? Simple question.
Yeah, so I might pass that for the companies to respond to, if that's all right with you, Doug.
Well, as I said when I spoke earlier, so we have a leakage target set by the regulator, and that's what at the moment we are funded to try and achieve.
You're not answering my question. Why can you not? I've heard all that. Why are you not putting more gangs on the road to repair the leaks? It's simple. If you've got 10 leaks, you want 10 loads of people.
You're right, getting the right level of resources.
So why are you not doing that? That's my question.
Well, we're putting the right resource in to achieve the targets that we need to achieve at the moment, and that is to reduce leakage down by 15%.
You're still not answering the question.
No, I'm trying to answer.
Why won't
Councillor
you put more
Coote, please.
gangs on the road?
Councillor Coote, please. Let the gentleman
Chairman,
speak.
I ask a question. If
Just
the gentleman
let him try to answer,
answer it, say so, and I will shut up.
Out of order. Will you please let the gentleman answer the question? Thank you.
So there's a number of different types of leakage, and you're right, more gangs will help us repair more leaks. But there are also, it's a case of detecting more leaks. Not all leaks are the visible leaks that you can see clearly. A lot of them are underground. There are leaks and weeps and seeps, difficult to detect. And also, it's not necessarily about, to achieve the leakage reductions we need, it's not necessarily about more gangs to reduce the leaks in that way. It's about looking at customer side leaks. It's about looking at managing pressure. It's not as straightforward as just putting more gangs in to reduce the leaks in that way. We put in as much resource as we can to achieve the targets that we set. But it's more gangs and more resource in the field is going to have to be a big part of reducing leakage. Every time we do that, it costs more money. Everything we're doing is a balance between, do you spend more money on leakage? Do you spend more money on resources? Do you spend more money on quality? And it's about balancing that. And so we balance that by making sure we try and achieve our regulatory targets on leakage. We could go further, but it would cost a lot more. And the lower your leakage gets, exponentially the cost of repairing those leaks goes up. Because the bigger, easier leaks are repaired, you're left with the smaller leaks that get you less benefit, so you need to repair more leaks to get the same benefit. So it's balanced. Everything's a balance.
Thank you. Councillor Christy Adams, please.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Price. I'm interested, how much profit does your company make in a year, and how much of your profit as a percentage do you spend on fixing leaks?
Thank you for the question. I would have to get back to you on terms of the amount of profit we make. We have that information that's obviously published in our annual report. I don't have that numbers to my fingertips, but I'm happy to provide that and also to let you know how much obviously is also spent on leakage. It is a considerable amount. We have the same, ambitious targets to achieve as South East Water, but if I can relay that after the meeting, I'm happy to do that.
Could I ask the other companies the same question?
Yeah, and it's going to be a similar answer. I'm sorry, I don't have that information. That's not there. I'm normally focused on. So we'll have to provide it afterwards.
So for me, just being involved in politics, we spend 0.5% of our GDP as a country on international aid. So it would be a really helpful thing for us to know how much as a water company do you spend on fixing leaks, because it seems to be that is a great solution to the problem, as well as each of us as individuals reducing the amount of water we use. And if possible, could you commit as companies to being able to contact each one of your customers to remind them of things like please use less water, and also then in a time of crisis to be able to contact them to say this is what's happening? Can you commit to being able to contacting each one of us as customers?
Yes, so as part of our drought plan, when we do come to a period of water sort of issues coming up with the water supply in the periods of hot weather, we do have a plan where we do contact all our customers. That's either by email or through the media. There's a big plan that we've got in place to ask people to use water wisely when we're approaching those periods of dry weather. Equally, but it's something we're doing all the time anyway. We are using social media channels, press, as and when we can, to get that messaging out there and also explain how customers can reduce their water use at all times of the year, not just during periods of hot weather, but also during periods of incidents as well.
So the question was, can you commit to being able to contact customers to let them know in a time of crisis, and you can do that even if you don't have every email address, you don't have...
Well, we can contact people. We use the media as well to reach those people that we don't have the contact details for, so where we can proactively.
What I'm saying is, can you ask customers for their contact details? Can you get a proper system in place? Because at the moment we don't have one. That's what I'm asking for.
What we're working with our lawyers at the moment to understand the consent process of contacting all our customers to ask that permission for those that we don't currently have. So we're actively working that as part of our improvement planning.
Thank you, Joe. Councillor Adam Peacock.
Thank you, Chair. Question for Mr. Dance. Obviously, at the start of your presentation, you put your 2075 management plan up, and it said by 2075 there would be a shortfall of 2.7 billion litres a day, I think, from memory. Obviously, you then put the glass up, and part of that was down to leak reduction, I believe. And was that?
No. Do you mind if I... Yeah.
Well, part of my... We'll move on from that. My question is, you said you need a 50% reduction in leaks, and you can realistically at the moment achieve roughly half of that through how you are now, from what you can see, and there'll be a development of new technology. And as an industry across the UK, you're working out how to achieve the remaining 25%, the remaining half of that 50%. Now, obviously, at the moment, as we stand, there's a question on how that can be achieved. That gap in reducing leaks, is there sufficient capacity in your existing plan to 2075 to fill that potential shortfall? Because at the moment it is a shortfall, it would appear to me, because we don't know how to achieve it. And I'm not saying there aren't the due reason and the very logical reasons. I should imagine if they're deep underground they can't be found. So does that total target and the initiatives to fill that gap have sufficient capacity to cover any gap that may come from not being able to achieve full leak reduction? And also, can I just say I welcome I personally welcome the introduction of the desalination plant because I think we all want to reduce water usage, but there becomes a point in time when we can only limit it so far for hygiene, quality of living issues. So I do think that, and we can't rely on continuous rain as we've seen last year. So thank you, Chairman. Thank you.
Lee, are you going to take that?
Yeah, I can take that.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, so on the first point, the 2.67 billion is the forecast of what water we need and what's driving that. So the drivers were around resetting where we take water from the environment, resilience, climate change, and population growth. So those are what are driving the need. Then turn into the solutions, leakage reductions of 50% and the reductions from household water use amount to just over 50% of the solution to meet that gap. The remainder comes from sharing of resources, transfers, desalination, new reservoirs, development of new supplies. So it's a twin track approach. There's an amount in there looking at building more supplies, more resilience, and there's an equal part in there looking at the reductions. On the leakage part, we can get down to that leakage number at an incredibly large cost. What we can also do in the early part is we can lean on innovation and technology to find and fix leaks quicker, identify leaks quicker, which was the point I probably didn't make as clearly earlier. Then you are relying on those very, very big, very, very expensive, very large mains replacement programs. And the roadmap that is being looked at is how you can either do that more cost effectively or whether there are other technologies that can be developed and come into play so that you can get a broader mix that's more cost effective and sustainable to hit that 50% leakage target. But that target is a commitment that the water companies have made, and it's a target they're working towards. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Janice Edward, please.
The last gentleman who explained water neutrality, what company do you work for?
Hi, yes, I work for Southern Water.
So I thought Southern Water, so you are both supplying drinkable water and you're also dealing with the wastewater also?
Yes, that's correct, we do.
Okay, but I find it interesting because I thought Southeast Water were our water suppliers and Southern was our drainage and wastewater.
No, so Southern Water, we do, as one of the original or water authorities, we provide the wastewater services from Isle of Wight through Hampshire, Sussex, across to Kent, so the whole sort of south of England. Then there are some water-only companies, which includes South East Water, that are water only. We do both water supply and wastewater. So in this area, we do the wastewater services.
So we can ask you questions about that, is that right?
You can ask me questions, although it's not my area of expertise, so I might have to take those questions and come back to you, but I'm happy if you want to ask, if there's time, if you want to ask a question.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Richard Babes, please.
You seem to stress quite a lot of emphasis on the amount of water leakage on properties. I mean, in my property, I can turn my water supply off and Water Authority could actually stop it coming onto the premises, no doubt. But sometimes you do see leaks from properties and they seem to go on and on forever and nothing's done about it. And you make this quite a big play on the amount of leakage.
Sorry, I'm not quite sure what the question is.
Well, we're back to the leakage, and it's really the Water Authority were raising this initially in their talk, saying that the majority of leakages was on private property.
Could I ask a question then, please, Lee?
I'll
If it's on
try and-
private property, is it your responsibility, or is it the responsibility of the householder?
So it's not the majority of the leakage, but it is a proportion of the leakage, and it's something we're becoming more aware of now that we're metered. So we can see more clearly whether the leakage is upstream of our meter or downstream. The water is included in our leakage calculation, so the amount of water that's used. So we can force a repair on a customer side, or we can work with the customer and we can try and help them to do that. So I think I'm explaining this right now. So it's in our leakage number. We don't own the pipe downstream of the meter. It is down to the customer to fix, but there are various steps we can take to do that. And it's becoming more important as the leakage number needs to get lower and lower. So whereas in the past we can deal with it all on our side, and actually it's downstream of the meter, it's the customer's issue. Now it's becoming more of a challenge, so we're going to have to work, and we want to work more closely with the customers so they understand what their responsibilities are and how we can fix those leaks more quickly.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a question about demand reduction. Seems to me that is very important, and in particular grey water or rainwater harvesting. I have a paper in front of me from a resident in Linfield who installed rainwater harvesting in 2009 till 2020 and recorded it entirely to 2020, and he reduced his per capita, his per person per day litres to 55 over those years. So he basically halved it, noting it's half of the 110 target. So my question is, are you considering that? I couldn't see anything in the South East Water Management Plan. Forgive me if I missed it. And what could we as a council do, as well as all yourselves, to promote rainwater harvesting?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so in our draft water resources management plan, we have included within the water efficiency section proposals to carry out a number of pilot trials and proof of concepts, particularly in the area of rainwater harvesting and grey water reuse. So we are committing in the next 5 years to really push that forward, particularly on the non-household side, particularly with farms and agriculture. We can see real benefits through those sort of interventions. So we have allowed for funding within our plan to really develop those areas and gain the insight that we might need to roll them out at a much larger scale.
Could I just ask a supplementary on that, Chairman?
Very quickly, please.
Could I provide you with a copy of the paper that this resident has written? He's a chartered engineer, and he's done a very detailed response.
Thank you. Councillor Robert Eggleston, please. You've been very quiet tonight, sir. I hope you were well.
You know me, I don't speak for the sake of it, you know. Thank you, Chairman. I too am interested in the desalination plants. We're an island nation, so on the face of it, we have an infinite supply of water surrounding us. I'd just like some feedback on the environmental impact of desalination plants and the kind of scale you would need to build at, and presumably is an energy-intensive activity, so how you would balance the water supply against our other net zero initiatives. And then finally, other than putting it on your chips, what you do with the byproduct.
Yeah, thank you. So, yeah, as you say, we have included a desalination plant in our longer term plans. Very conscious of the environmental impacts associated with it in terms of the very high energy costs that it would need to run, particularly around the processes that are involved, and also the brine discharge that at the moment we would need to sort of send out to sea in a sort of long sea outfall. So as much as we see the benefits of desalination, we do think that we want to push it back a little bit further so that we can allow the technology to develop and the process to be further developed such that it could be a more sustainable solution. So we just want to give ourselves a little bit more time for the technology to get there before we commit to sort of further development.
Thank you. Councillor Simon Hicks, please.
Just to come back on water leaks, is there anything we as councillors can do to escalate issues where there is a water leak that has been persistent and doesn't appear to be addressed, and actually get some information from the water company? Would be useful.
I think the short answer will probably be yes. We can give you the route to make sure it's been escalated in the right way. So maybe we'll speak to you afterwards to make sure you've got those communication routes in.
I'm conscious of the time. Are these further questions from Councillor Edward relevant, please?
Chairman, this is the question I wish to address to Southern Water. It's a very quick question. 2019 water cycle stated the 9 wastewater treatment works in the Gatwick sub-region are predicted to or are already exceeding their flow permit during the planned period. And this is 2019. I'd like to know how you are addressing this issue. This can be written, if you like, unless you have the answer on the top of your head.
I probably can't completely answer that, your question fully. I would, all I'll say at the moment is to highlight, we've talked mostly tonight about our water resource management plan, but we are now in process of developing a new plan called a drainage and wastewater management plan, which is looking at some of the longer term challenges to ensure that we're investing in the right areas to support growth and provide that long-term resilience. So that there was a consultation on that draft plan last year. In terms of that specific area, though, I would need to ask colleagues who work on the wastewater side and get back to you on that.
Thank you. Councillor John DeBell, I didn't see where you were, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to say a couple of things, really. First of all, thank you for coming along tonight. I think you're very brave. There are a lot of concerns, obviously, over the last few months, particularly with leakages, wastewater into the water supply. All we really want to know, all the residents of Mid Sussex want to know is, are you confident that you have your hands on this? Are you sure that, I mean, sooner or later, my concern is that wastewater is going to overtake our water supply altogether with the growth of numbers of people, a population explosion, everything else. Are you confident that you've got your hands on this to deal with the leakages, to provide the water that people of Mid Sussex need, and to make sure that we don't finish up drinking some very nasty stuff? That's the crux of everything that we need to know, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, please.
So, yeah, thanks for that point, and that is absolutely what we're here to try and do. So, and you can see the challenges we've had in the last few years, I think, have brought this to everyone's attention, and we wish that we hadn't had the issues we'd had. The long-term plans, I think, remain the right long-term plans. What's happened in the last couple of years, as we're getting more weather extremes now, and the lockdown and the change in demand, has meant we've got this relatively short-term issue where things that we thought were going to happen in 10 years' time have suddenly happened now, and the weather extremes are putting more challenge on that. So I think you've got some short-term pinch points, so there's no denying that, and we need to focus on the short-term of how we mitigate those. And then we need to adapt those into the longer-term plans, which I think are being developed now. So I think the answer is yes, but there are some challenges in the short term, I think, because infrastructure investment is not normally quick, and it's certainly the changes we've seen in demand, I think, the last years have happened more quickly than our plans were expecting. So I don't want to add any more to that, Lee.
Thank you. I believe you've got one more item to come from you, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. Please, would you like to take the floor?
Thank you. Yeah, so the last few slides in the pack here are to take you through an overview of our current draft water resources management plan. So when we develop our water resources management plan, we split our supply area into 8 water resource zones. So Haywards Heath is our water resource zone number 2, and that's the area that Mid Sussex district falls within. So as you can see there, some of the sort of key statistics, there's over 300,000 people within this zone. The demand on average can go up as much as 77 million litres per day. In this particular zone, the makeup of the water is split fairly equally between surface water and groundwater. So whereas as a company we're fairly dominated on groundwater, this zone, we've got quite a large supply which comes from Marlington Reservoir and Ardingly Reservoir. And then the remainder of that comes from groundwater aquifers and then from a bulk supply which we take from Southern Water. So the challenges in terms of the longer term plan, so we look over a 50-year period, we look from 2025 through to 2050, and the coloured bars on this chart are showing you how we consider the future in terms of an adaptive plan. So we look at not just one future, we look at what could happen if we sort of look at various uncertainties around the abstraction reduction. So as Lee said, we're committing to making sure the environment improves. And to do that, we need to reduce the abstractions that we currently take, and that's effectively losing around 20% of our available water in that zone. We've also got the consideration of climate change. So the climate change predictions that we take account of suggest a further 6% in the available water. The growth that we consider, so we look at various different growth forecasts, looking at housing plan, looking at ONS data, and those give us a range of different growth forecasts that we consider and take into account. And then finally, the last one is looking at the drought resilience. So at the moment, we plan to a drought resilience of 1 in 200-year drought. We're looking at improving that and going to a 1 in 500-year drought. So those are the uncertainties that we consider. And as you can see from the coloured bars, depending on how severe or how pessimistic it could be, we could see potentially a reduction in or a deficit or a shortfall of water of as much as 74 million litres per day by 2075. So those are the challenges that we need to address through the Water Resources Management Plan. So the management plan was published in November and went out to consultation, and the consultation closed on the 20th of February. So we're now in a period where we're developing our statement of response to the representations that came in. So some of the key highlights, and these are across our whole company rather than just the Haywards Heath zone. So we're looking at a population increase that will take us to a population base of around about 2.8 million by 2050. We are committing to the government targets of reducing our per capita consumption, so moving from around about 146 litres per day to 112 litres per day per person. We take account of non-household, so we look at the non-household growth, and we're predicting a slight increase in non-household. The abstraction reductions that we're committing to across the company is as much as 160 million litres per day, so that's water that we will lose and we'll need to find from elsewhere, either through new sources or through reducing demand. As Doug touched on earlier, we are very, very keen to make sure the resilience at a sub-zonal level, so within a zone, we need to make sure that we can move the water sufficiently and we've got sufficient storage and capacity within that zone. Because we're losing sources of water and because the working from home changes have potentially moved the areas of demand, we need to make sure that we can maintain that connectivity going forward. As I said, we're looking to reduce our drought resilience, and that will be done by 2040. In terms of the costs, in order to produce new infrastructure and to create new sources of water, we're looking at investing 2.2 billion over the next 50 years. And on the other side of that, we're looking at similar amounts to drive down our leakage and to reduce customer demand. And then just finally, just a sort of a plan on a page here. So you can see almost a twin track approach that we've got through reducing leakage, to reducing customer demand, and then the new sources of water that we're looking to make available. So on the map, we've got the arrows, the coloured arrows, and those are our new transfers of water. So those are either moving between our own zones or potentially moving water between other companies. So working collaboratively with the other companies in our region through the regional work that Lee mentioned earlier. In terms of the major strategic schemes, we've got desalination in the longer term in Kent. We've got 2 new reservoirs. So we've got a reservoir in Broadoak in Canterbury and a second reservoir in Arlington in Sussex. We're also looking at the opportunity to recycle water. So working closely with Southern Water to take their treated effluent from Peacehaven, looking to treat that to a standard that's such that we could then move that water into what we call an environmental buffer, where we could then treat it to drinking water standard and then deliver into supply. So those are the key schemes that we've got in the plan. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Have I any questions, please? Councillor Eggleton.
Thank you, Chairman. You shouldn't have encouraged me. I'm interested in, my doctor keeps telling me to drink more water, and I'm interested in how we reduce, so we're around 140 odd litres per day. We're looking to reduce that to 112 by 2050. In our next agenda item, as a part of the district plan, we're saying for the large sites, we should reduce customer demand to 85 litres a day. So how do you actually set about reducing consumption of water by individuals?
So through a number of interventions. So there's the company interventions that we are committing to, and through those company interventions, we've got smart metering programs. We've got household audits, so working with customers so that they understand the areas in which they could reduce demand potentially through leaking loos and through other plumbing losses in their houses. We're looking at a behavioural change programme, so working with customers such that they can compare their usage to their neighbours, and we can look at driving demand through changing behaviours. So those are the areas that we have control of as a company, but we're also aware that we need support from government. So the government published a paper looking at water labelling, on new devices in the home. So that's an area that will be key. And then the next step on that is making that mandatory. And then the final step in terms of government intervention is through much tighter building regulations. Because we know that to get to 110, we've got to either have very strict building regulations on new homes, or we're going to have to retrofit existing homes. So to get to that 110, we obviously need to go really strong on the new homes to offset that balance between the two.
Thank you. I do confirm to members that we will ensure all the slides that we've been shown tonight will be circulated to you. Councillor Clark, yes.
Very quick. I found the presentation very interesting, but I just wanted to thank Southern Water for the visit we had at their Goddard's Green, and the development that's going on there is, when it's finished, is going to be very interesting. It's not for this particular meeting, but the work that's going on there. I was very impressed with, and impressed with the people showing us around. It was a very cold day, icy, but it was a very interesting tour, and the things that they were doing there are very good, and it'd be very good when that's up and running completely. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen from the water authorities, we are very grateful to you for giving your time to coming along here tonight and giving the explanations you have. It's comforting to realise that you are well aware of the problems we're facing in water supply for the future. Thank you again. Thank you for being patient with all our questions. And if you would so like, you're more than welcome to stay and hear the rest of the meeting, but if you'd like to go, I'm saying. Could I just, before you go, could I take members to the recommendation on page 17, paragraph 3? The recommendation is that the Scrutiny Committee for Planning, Economic Growth and Net Zero, 1, notes the contents of this report and the presentations to be made by the water companies at the security meeting. I would now ask you to vote using the normal procedures. That's complete, isn't it? So, okay. The result was 13 in favour, no abstentions and no one against, which I think shows our appreciation of what you've done. Thank you very much indeed. Is that good enough? Shall I have a comfort break now? Certainly. Fellow members, could we now turn to back to the agenda, item 7, pages 35 to 98. Who's going to?
Sally.
Barry, yes. Sally, please.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst the report is self-explanatory, I should just like to draw out a couple of points. Firstly, and importantly, the purpose of this report is simply to summarise the representations made to the draft district plan during its first round of consultation. It's not the purpose of this report to set out officers' views and recommendations on the REPs or to set out proposed changes to the plan. That stage will happen later in the year when this scrutiny committee will be asked to consider the next iteration of the draft plan, the Reg 19 version. However, in recognition of the time taken for plan preparation, the level of interest in the outcome of consultation, and in light of requests to make the outcome clear, officers agreed that it would be helpful at this stage to summarise the representations received and to publish all comments in full on our web pages, which has now been done. In terms of the consultation itself, I would just like to highlight some key headlines. 1,365 respondents, very similar to the same stage at the site's development plan document. The makeup of the respondents is set out in Figure 1, but it's clear that statutory consultees, neighbouring local authorities, town and parish councils, interest groups, and importantly residents all took part in the process. Together, they made over 2,880 individual comments on policies and the plan. Whilst the majority of the comments were to the proposed site allocations, there were still 800 comments on the 58 draft policies. 27 of these policies received 5 or fewer objections. The number of reps to sites are summarised by site in the table on page 41 to 42. And of note, of the 26 sites proposed, 8 sites received 5 or fewer objections. All the reps are summarised by chapter and policy in Appendix 1. The report also sets out our next steps in preparation of the plan in paragraphs 50 to 52. And it's clear that there's a significant amount of work to do to get to the next stage, not least careful consideration of all the reps made and making proposed revisions to the plan in the light of the reps where justified and evidence-based. Finally, the council's local delivery scheme identifies that the next formal stage of plan making will take place in summer or autumn of this year, with an independent examination anticipated in early 2024. So to conclude, as this report is simply a summary of the outcome of consultation and next steps, the recommendations are to note the comments and to note the additional work required. Thank you.
Councillor Christy Adams, please.
Thank you so much for the report. It's excellent reading and very thorough. I'd just like to make a comment, if I may, Chair, that 417 responses were from the Albourne area, so that was the area around Sayers Common, Reeds Lane, and 271 came from Bolney. And I'm really proud of the community that I serve, because it was a monumental effort in terms of I put out 650 letters, and the parish councils in Bolney and Albourne and Hurstfield Point, and particularly Jeff Seidler in Albourne, did some amazing work of connecting our community and ensuring that they were able to respond and had the information for it. And I just would like to say thank you to the officers for what they've done, but also to our community for responding, because I think that is a fantastic consultation response.
Thank you. Councillor Robert Eggleston, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. And I appreciate tonight is not the night to pick out sites for discussions and to look at the report that's been presented, and I'm grateful to the officers for the summary. But I do think that we have to be mindful of, and picking up Councillor Adams's point, we have to be mindful of the representations made by the community, so parish, town councils, other organisations and residents, and where we've got effectively of all the feedback, 85% of the representations are in the form of an objection and specifically around sites. My view is that the working with site promoters at this stage, I perfectly understand and accept, but I do think we have an opportunity between now and bringing the report back for the Regulation 19 stage for us also to engage with the communities that have engaged in this process. And where you have sites like in Bolney, Sayers Common and Albourne, and indeed a site in which I'm particularly interested in, the allotments in Burgess Hill, where the scale of objections from the community are so great that to leave it until we get to Regulation 19 without engaging them in the process now, in my view, would be a mistake. So I'd like to see as part of the next steps, and we have time to do this, as part of the next steps for us as a council to go back to those communities and better understand their concerns and work with them either to resolve them or to take them on board and deal with them in the process and amend the plan accordingly. Number one. Number two, I see in the report that some other sites have been proposed, and I think it would be appropriate for the working party to be reconvened and take them through that process. And I would suggest also that the sites where the scale of objections are so high, that those sites should also be referred back to the working party for reconsideration. Because clearly we have, in this plan making process, we know we have a problem. We have a target that's been imposed upon us. We have sites where the scale of objections are considerable, and if we're accepting that a lot of those objections are valid, then how do we square that circle? And I think we do need to work through that process in a way that's fair to everyone. I also think that it's an opportunity for us to, you know, I raised a query with officers a while back about our master planning process and whether our master plans, ever have a natural expiry date, because the world moves on, but our master plans stay in effect for all time, and the world changes. And I'll give you an example. In the neighbourhood plan in Burgess Hill, for the Burgess Hill Railway site, where the neighbourhood plan allocates 150 housing units, but also allocates land for commercial and retail development. Now, we all know that we're struggling to redevelop the Martlet Shopping Centre, so it kind of begs the question whether a part of the Burgess Hill Station site is suitable for retail anymore if we can't meet the redevelopment in the town centre. And if that's the case, why not revisit the allocation there? Because it might well affect the proposed allocation for the Chanctonbury allotment site and the Queen's Crescent car park. So in summary, Chair, I think, you know, as part of our next steps, and I know we hint at it, but I think we should undertake to do it. One, take this back to the working party to look at it in detail, and two, undertake that we engage with our parish and town councils and people who've made representatives so that they can be part of this development process. Thank you.
Judy? Please, thank you.
Thanks. If I make a start, and then I'll for the more detailed questions, I'll ask my colleagues Sally or Andrew to come in on particularly on the master planning point around updating. In respect to the first question around engagement, I think it's fair to say that we are quite proud of the levels of engagement that we have with all of the stakeholders. And yes, of course, if it's requested, we'd be very happy to do that and understand and learn more about the rationale. I think it's important to remember that all of this work has got to be justified. It's all evidence-based, as you know, and the sites were allocated in accordance to a criteria which the working group applied to each of the sites. And whilst, of course, we've got objections, and it's important that we understand the nature of those objections, and if necessary, commission and carry out further work, the objections on their own will not necessarily mean that those sites are no longer suitable in accordance with the criteria, so we'll have to carefully balance that. With respect to reconvening the working group, I think I'd draw your attention to page 45, paragraph 50, where we actually make that point ourselves, that there may be a need to reconvene that working group, subject to what further work we do. And of course, that wouldn't just apply to sites that were omitted, but it would also apply to any other further evidence that we got that suggested that that allocation was no longer suitable or appropriate in accordance with our criteria. Because as you know, this process is organic and planning never stops. We always say that. With respect to the master planning point, neighbourhood plans can be updated, and we've said we would always support that if towns and parishes were interested in wanting to update their plans. But I'm just going to ask Sally and Andrew if there's anything more they wanted to add to that. Yes,
Sally, please.
Thank you, Chair. The neighbourhood plan is a really helpful starting point. It sets out principles, general principles, and one of those, as you say, is mixed-use development for that site, redevelopment for that site. But it's not a master plan in the sense of the Burgess Hill Master Plan, which was approved as an SPD. And we do, in fact, reflect those principles within the neighbourhood plan, within the policy requirements set out within the document. We quite clearly say master plan a comprehensive redevelopment of the scheme, which takes account of principles in the neighbourhood plan, including mixed-use development. So it is built within the policy itself. And these policies, as you know, will be reviewed. We review our plans regularly in line with government requirements.
Thank you, Sally. Andrew, you want to add to that? No, fine. Right, Councillor Richard Bates, please.
Yeah, I'm curious, there's two sites, small sites in Hurstwood Lane, and I got a comments back when presumes the objectors, saying that the financial contribution will go to Lewes District Council. But obviously the land is not in Lewes, and I just wondered how that had come about.
What page is that, please?
It's page 76, where it occurs on twice. It's the DPH 9 and 10 that refers to. I mean, it's an interesting case because Colwell Lanes in Haywards Heath goes into Lewes and comes out in Haywards Heath at the other end at Lewes Road. But the land here is adjacent to the country park, which is part of, that part is Haywards Heath.
Okay, Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, that's a comment made obviously by somebody who's responded to the consultation. It's not correct that the money would come to us because the development is in our area.
That's right. I just wondered, I mean, would you write back to the people and point out that is the case?
Yeah, I mean, what we do with the representation, we don't respond individually to all of them because there are nearly 3,000. But obviously, if there was something that warranted us making a change to the plan, or we needed to make it clearer in the plan, then we would take that on board. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Councillor Janice Henwood, please.
Two comments, Chairman. On page 44, I'm quite interested when we talk about the National Health Service. Their comments, I am quite flabbergasted that they will enable to deliver alongside new homes. Can you see where I'm talking about, the NHS? I am flabbergasted because from a very parochial point of view in Burgess Hill, most of East Burgess Hill, considerably new houses, there's no national health facility, no doctors whatsoever, just to point that out. So I hope the council will really work hard with NHS providers to make sure for that happens in the future. I'm also very hopeful that the amendments suggested under here by especially Southern Water, I found it surprising that Southern Water responded, but not Southeast. But anyway, I won't go down that route again. But I'm hoping some of those amendments obviously will be taken on board by your planners. But another point I wanted to make was that a lot of the sites are greenfield sites, and there was no ecological survey done on any of these sites. We also have Woodlands Trust commenting on the possibility of ancient trees. So my question is, how flexible, how resilient is this plan for the number of units suggested for these sites when there has been no ecological survey suggesting there might be a species, protected species, suggesting there might be ancient trees whereby you have to provide a buffer around the trees. So how secure can the plan be on the number of units being suggested? Thank you, Chairman.
Andrew, please.
Thank you. Yeah, we must remember that the local plan process is based on a proportionate evidence base, so that's not exactly the same level of detail you would expect for a planning application. What a couple of respondents have mentioned, I think the Wildlife Trust is one of them, was that they recommend that ecological surveys are carried out for some of the sites. We would, in our liaison with the site promoter, we would look at the sort of issues that are being raised by respondents, and we would ask them to have one of those prepared to support the site when we go through examination. But ordinarily, it would be in a policy requirement in the plan that would be provided at application stage. So it's sort of belt and braces, really. We have enough confidence that, that we can continue to support the site through the plan process, recognising that some things might come out at application stage which might reduce yields. And we know that that's the case on a couple of our sites. And that's where the detail would come in and the mitigation. The other thing just on ecology really is obviously we have got the requirement for biodiversity net gain of 10%, and that will be mandatory.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Christie Adams, please.
Question for Judy, please. Thank you, Chair. In light of the Secretary of State's comments on housing, could you expand any further how this would affect the numbers and land supply that we would be required in mid-Sussex to provide? And how it would affect the Reg 19?
Judy?
Thank you. So you're referring to the proposed changes that the recent NPF consultation suggests. You'll see in the report we've touched on that, recognising that actually we find ourselves in a fairly opportune position actually, insofar as we are at a stage in our plan making where it actually aligns with the potential, well, with the proposed outcome of the consultation. The government is saying they're hoping to make an announcement in the spring, which aligns with our plan making. You will also see that we've made a response as a council, and we've responded specifically around the special characteristics aspects of the proposed changes. And the point that we are making is that we believe that by using different data sets, i.e. the up-to-date household projections and work-related affordability rates, that would have an impact on the housing number because it would better reflect the needs in this district. And the Cabinet member has made that point in his return to the Secretary of State as part of that consultation. If that is taken into account, and it's a big if, then yes, as the report indicates, that would have an impact on the amount of housing that we would need to supply.
Thank you. Councillor John de Bell, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I wanted to apologise to you, Mr. Chairman, and to Councillor Eggleston. Given him pause during his very interesting submission, we were concerned concerning the health of a member of this team, which is why we were consulting while this was going on. I just wanted to say thank you, officers, for all the work that you've done. Obviously, the majority of the council have full confidence in the process and progress of what we're doing here, and we want to make sure that this goes through. Although it's got time to go through, I know, because it is the way to control unfettered development, and that is what we need to be doing. And though there have been people that have raised things that have cost an awful lot of money, quite unnecessarily, and the whole of the district seem to be getting behind this and raising certain concerns, obviously, but we recognise that this is supported by the majority council and that eventually, however long it takes, it will deliver the right verdict. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I do that? No. Councillor Paul Brown, please.
Thank you, Chairman. My first question is just to ask about the working party. It seems rather self-evident that it will be needed at some stage, and I'd like to make a request that we don't have the stop-start situation we had during 2022, where we spent about 6 or 7 months or more with no action, and then suddenly in August we were called upon to attend and work through in a very pace all the various issues in August. So that's my first point. And my second point is about figure 1 which I've now lost. The diagram, here it is. It's on page 38. And it, underneath it says in italics, includes comments not related to the district plan and duplicate comments. So how many are there? And are these, I mean, I can't imagine anybody making a duplicate comment. If you make your comment, you won't make it twice. So what are these comments here in the bottom horizontal section, and how many are there? And are they matters, for instance, that people felt were missing from the district plan? Thank you.
Andrew, please.
Thank you, yes. You'll see in the top, next to the big 2881, there were 12 that we've classified as other. From my knowledge, they weren't related to the district plan. They might have been talking about the site allocations, DPD, sites that are allocated in the DPD, town centre master plan, that sort of thing, which aren't directly related to the content of this report. And in terms of duplicate comments, that can happen if somebody sends in an email and a letter, for example, which some people do.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Robert Eggleton, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just really wanted to come back on my comments and Judy's reply. So when I look at, and I'm sorry to press this point, and I don't know whether I need to move it as an amendment to the recommendations, but when you look at, for example, land to the west of Burgess Hill, which is in Hurstby Point, and gets 136 objections out of 145 replies, Sayers Common, 402 objections out of 417. You can pick out others where the scale of objections are overwhelming. And so I'd like us to specifically undertake as a district council that we will engage with those parish and town councils and bring them into the process, because I don't think just talking to the site promoters is not going to be enough, and we shouldn't leave it until we get to Regulation 19, because we know that once we get to Regulation 19, we're at a position where the plan is in readiness for inquiry, and it's very unusual for sites to be taken out at the Regulation 19 stage. What often happens is more sites get put in, and I think where you've got clearly somewhere like Sayers Common, the land, the Western Arc, as it will be called, the Chanctonbury allotments, and so on, where you've got clearly it's a problem for people who are making representations, and there's a huge amount, I've said this before, there's a huge amount of cynicism over the plan making process. People do think that they make representations and basically we change the odd sentence here or there, but actually their views are bypassed. And so I do feel, and I want to push this point, that we should engage at the same time as you're talking to site promoters. You should engage with the parish and town councils, particularly on those sites where the scale of objections are so high. So I'd like a commitment on that, and if I need to move it as an amendment to the recommendations, I will. And likewise, if we've got new sites coming in, and again, looking at some of the, those difficult sites, the best place to worry through the detail is by reconvening the working party. So instead of May in the report, I think we should undertake to do that as well. And I think we have the time. There's nothing about disrupting the plan-making process. It's about ensuring that we are, best of class when it comes to engaging people in the process. And I would like to press that point, Chair.
Judy, please.
I think just breaking down what you've said, I think the first thing I would comment on is that I wouldn't argue that the scale of the representations is actually extraordinary necessarily, but I think we can see clearly which sites people are objecting to the most. I think I've already said it, but I'll say it again, that it's really important from an officer's perspective that we ensure that the plan that we present to council is evidence-based and has got the best chance of getting through a public examination. This work, as you know, is very resource-intensive, and we've already committed lots and lots of resources to supporting the process, and of course we'll continue to do that. And where we believe that there is evidence that we need to commission further evidence, that the objections actually require us to go back and do more work, of course we will do that. And if appropriate and necessary, we would clearly re-engage with those relevant parishes to explore and discuss and explain. And of course, if the committee wanted to convene a working group, then we would support that process. And what we're saying is that if we feel that the evidence does no longer support it as a safe and appropriate allocation, then we would clearly need to discuss that. So I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for. I think I've covered all the points you made.
I'm looking for a commitment, Chair.
Sorry?
Chairman, I'm looking for a commitment that we will, particularly on these problematic sites, we will, not if appropriate, but we will engage with the parish and town councils, and we will convene the working party to look at those problematic sites and any additional sites that come through. It's quite simple. If I need to move that as an amendment, then I will, and I'll look for a seconder.
Julie?
So obviously from an officer's perspective, all I can say to you is that if there was anything, if any evidence came to light through this consultation process or through the further work that it led us to commission, that meant that the criteria was no longer applicable and that it wasn't safe to continue with that allocation, with that proposed allocation, then we would want to obviously bring that to the attention of the committee. And from an officer's perspective, if this committee then wanted to convene a working group, then of course we would support that. And I can give that commitment from an officer's perspective.
What I want, Chair, is a level playing field between the parish councils and the town councils and the site promoters. I don't think that's unreasonable, and I'm sure, this is not party political, this is about, and it's not a Burgess Hill thing, it's about every parish and every town council, that in this process, we treat parish and town councils, on a similar basis to site promoters, a level playing field.
Okay. Chrissy Adams, please.
Thank you, Councillor Eccleston. I think what I hear you saying is that you want to make sure everybody's voice is heard. So in response to what I feel you're really saying, I think that within my community, in my ward, in Albourne, in Twynham, in Warninglid, in Slaffham, in Bolney, I believe that through the Reg 18 process, the voice has been heard. And everybody, the level of comments, the 271 that came from Bolney, the 417 that came from Albourne, Twynham and Sayers Common, I think that this council has heard the voice of the community, and I actually do trust our officers to be fair. And I honestly believe that the community can be very confident that there is a fair process going on. And I don't think that we need an additional process apart from what we've had at Reg 18. All those comments are going to be in the public realm. They're being very open with the process. So that's just a comment to add in.
Thank you. Kevin, I need your guidance on this, please.
Thank you, Chair. So in relation to the potentially proposed motions, it's important for this committee to remember that Scrutiny is an advisory committee, and in this process, it's a committee that's advising council. So in relation to what I've heard are essentially two potential motions. Firstly, in relation to the working party, that's obviously a matter for this committee to decide. So it can decide whether or not to reconvene that working party. In relation to further forms of engagement with stakeholders, what this committee could do, and I've tried to word a recommendation, it could recommend to council that, for example, it positively engages with the town and parish councils on insert relevant items here. But that is the furthest that this committee could go. So that would then carry as a proposal to the next available council meeting that could determine that issue. So that's hopefully helpful, Chair.
Okay, what are we doing? Okay.
I think that's fine, isn't it? So, to go back to council.
Oh, you've got to propose an amendment then?
Sorry, yes, Chairman. In the terms that Mr Toogood suggested, with the addition on the second one, which is the positive engagement with parish town councils prior to the Regulation 19 process. So before it comes back here for Reg 19, in addition to have engaged with site promoters, we would have also engaged with parish and town councils. Unfortunately, Councillor Adams, I bear the scars of SA12 and SA13, where thousands of people made representations and didn't make a blind bit of difference.
Go back to... Okay. Kevin, before we vote on this, can we have your advice?
Thank you, Chair. That sounds like a valid motion to me. So what I've noted is that this committee would recommend to council that it positively engages with the town and parish councils prior to the Regulation 19 process.
Thank you.
Chair, you'll need a seconder for that motion as well.
Okay. Right.
Sorry, Chair.
Sorry? Councillor?
I'm just wondering, do we need the word positively? Because I don't understand what positively means. Just engage. I'm sorry to be pedantic, but maybe I'm not being pedantic. Maybe I don't understand what positively means. It's a concept, you know.
Thank you. As I see no other comments, I suppose we better go to the vote on this, please.
No, you need a seconder.
Sorry? We need a seconder, please. Sorry, Councillor Higgs. Thank you. Right. With that, sorry? Sorry?
Any more further questions?
Any more questions, please?
No, okay, so good.
Turn to item 8, questions pursuant to Council Procedure Rule
We've got to
10.2.
read the recommendation.
Sorry?
We've read the recommendation.
The amendment. We need to do the main motion.
We need to go.
Oh, we have to go through the recommendation. I do beg your pardon, sorry. The recommendation is on page 35, agenda item 7, paragraph 3. With 3, the Scrutiny Committee for Planning, Economic Growth and Net Zero are recommended 1, to note the comments received during the public consultation on the draft Mid-Sussex District Plan 2021 to 2039 and supporting documentation, and 2, to note the additional work required and the next steps ahead of the Regulation 19 And then 3, we have the amendment. Could you please read that out, Kevin?
Excuse me, Mr Chairman, can you tell me what we're voting for now, please, because I'm a little bit confused. We've just
This is the
carried
recommend.
Councillor Eggleston's vote, yes.
Kevin, can we sort this out, please?
Thank you, Chair. So the motion to amend the original recommendation to include Councillor Eggleston's suggestion has been carried. So we're now voting on essentially the remainder of the original motion. So that's to, as read out by the Chair. Thank you.
So can we proceed to the vote, please, by? Yeah. But as members can see, it was voted, it was 100% unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, that has been unanimously carried with 14 votes.
Thank you. Right. Now then, proceeding to item 8, questions pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 10.2, due notice which has been given. I have none. So anyway, before I close the meeting, I would possibly like to say a few words, but I gather that Councillor Peacock wishes to say something.
Oh, thank you, Chairman.
I hope it's not going to embarrass me.
Well, Mr Chairman, I would like to thank you on behalf of the committee and fellow councillors for your dedication and commitment in chairing this committee for over the last 12 years. Many will know you were first elected to the District Council in 2011 and immediately appointed chairman of this committee. After 12 years of distinguished service, you've decided not to seek re-election in May. And I think I speak for everyone when I say your knowledge, experience, dedication and focus will be missed, and you leave a legacy of stability and clarity, having led scrutiny for the adoption of the current district plan, the recent DPD process, and also the current district plan update. They're all very complex, time-consuming, and at times potentially controversial. So, thank you very much.
So if I could add a few words reflection on the past 12 years. This committee has done many good and needed things, but perhaps the most notable and important of these has been the present adopted district plan, which has provided the safeguard for our residents against the scourge of unwanted speculative development that so bedeviled us prior to 2018. We are presently at Regulation 18, at the Regulation 18 stage on the proposed new district plan. This has been no mean achievement. Having worked with our officers over those years, whilst I appreciate how hard members are, I realise, by comparison, our officers have worked one hell of a lot more. They've been incredibly professional and diligent throughout, and I cannot thank them enough for all their support and guidance, for all they have done, and above all, for putting up with me. I would therefore like to place on record my personal thanks to Terry, Lucinda, Alison, Alex, and all the folk in MIS, and in particular to Judy, Sally, Andrew, and their team, always supported by Catherine. Despite all the ups and downs, it has been an honour and a privilege to have chaired this meeting this committee for so long. So my sincere thanks to both officers and members for all your support. I shall greatly miss it, and I shall greatly miss you. Dare I say it, even some members of the opposition. But whatever the future may hold for you all, I wish you all well. Thank you for listening, and with that, I will, for the very last time, bring this meeting to a close at 9:11 p.m. Thank you very much.